Okay, I think my internet is moving a little slowly. I am in Oregon, so not from my regular spot, but let's give it a go. Welcome, as I said, thank you all so much for being here. It's wonderful to see all of you. Go ahead, and if you haven't yet, put your organization, your affiliation, if you have one, and if you don't, you're more than welcome to be here regardless. Your neighborhood council, if you're with one, in the chat. We are the LA Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. Our mission is to advance sustainability and resilience across the city through advocacy, through sharing of best practices and community action. My slides are not advancing. Let's see if I can make them advance. I kind of can. Our agenda this evening is introductions and housekeeping, which is what we're doing right now. Then we're going to dive into what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation about SB 79. And then towards the end of the evening, we'll have committee reports. We have several really active committees, and we are looking for leadership or co-leadership for most of those committees. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you join us and help us on those committees. So more to come on that. Then we'll have announcements from anybody who wants to share them. And we also want to hear what you think about how we're doing on meetings like these. So throughout the evening and also at the end of the evening, we'll ask you to chime in and let us know what you think. We have community agreements, which might be particularly important this evening because this is a bit of a divisive topic. So a few things that we ask you to do tonight are turn on your camera if you can and show your face so that we can continue to build community. Assume good intent and give people this evening the benefit of the doubt. Demonstrate respect and appreciation. Refrain from having too many side conversations in the chat. I love the chat, I'll say. It can be a bit of a distraction, but it can also really enrich the conversation. So use it, but use it judiciously. Listen intently. Step forward and then step back, meaning contribute, and also let others do the same. Be concise if possible, and have fun. We are recording this evening's meeting. We do want to be as interactive as possible. So when the time comes, we'll ask you to raise your hand to contribute. And we're also going to introduce some people right now before we dive in, which we're going to start doing very shortly. I'm Lisa Hart. I am the executive director of the organization, and I'm also on the Green Committee of the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. A couple of our board members are out this evening, but a couple of my colleagues are here. I'll start with Charles. Charles, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Hey everybody, Charles Miller. I'm on the board. I'm also the chair of the Green Committee for the Palms Neighborhood Council and the chair of Climate Reality Project Los Angeles, and heavily involved in a bunch of other nerdy stuff. I will throw to Muriel.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for spending your Sunday with us. I'm also part of the board. I'm also the chair of the now newly changed Transportation and Land Use Committee, and we are searching for a new co-chair. Okay, yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Muriel. Anders, why don't you go ahead?
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. I am Anders Johnson. I am one of the policy and communications interns for the Sustainability Alliance, and I am a rising junior at USC right now.
Great, thank you. And Chen Yao.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chen Yao. I'm also one of the Sustainability Policy and Communications interns for this summer, and I'm a rising junior at UPenn.
Thank you. And Isabel.
I'm the last of the sustainable and policy and communications interns. I am currently a rising fourth year at UC Santa Barbara, and yeah, happy to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, I would like to dive in and say a few words about our exciting panel. And if you folks who are helping out tonight could spotlight them, that would be great. We have a really great panel to talk about this SB 79 tonight. I think I'll introduce them as they pop up on your screen. We have Stacy Shure, who, gosh, I've known her for several years now, and I'll just say I adore her. She was on the Mar Vista Community Council, and I'll let her say some more about her as she talks later. And she was also really a huge contributor to our sustainability guidelines for developers. And she's also, she's not wearing this hat tonight, but she also works in the LA City Attorney's Office, but she's not wearing that hat. And then Chris Rhie, who's been so helpful to us, he was a huge role on our, when we were doing a Cool Box program, which was great. And he's also a co-lead, I believe he calls himself, of Urban Environmentalists, as well as wearing many, many other hats in the city. And Jordan Grimes, who is the resilience manager of Greenbelt Alliance. And we are missing one of our panelists who I think needs to play a critical role in this conversation tonight. So I hope she joins. Oh, wait, is she here, Muriel? Is that what you're saying?
I'm here. Hi.
Laura, you're here?
I can't spotlight her. I'm trying to.
Okay, great, but she's here. Okay, perfect. She's here. Fantastic. Okay.
Yay.
Laura Gracia-Santiago with Communities for a Better Environment. Thank you, Laura, for being here. So good, because I did not want to have this conversation without you. I think we'd be missing a huge voice in this. So I'm glad we have all of our panelists here. And I wanted to say also, I do think this is, I know this can be a very polarizing conversation, housing and how we manage our shortage has been a really challenging conversation in California, and I imagine other parts of the world that I'm mostly familiar with here. But I do think or imagine that we all probably have similar visions for what our city might look like going forward, although we probably have we probably would prioritize things differently, and I imagine we have different theories of change. So I would just like to keep that in mind as we go forward. And I'd like, before we jump into the panel, I'd like for everybody to put in the chat what your thoughts on SB 79 are. And you know, maybe not maybe filter your thoughts slightly to make sure that they're polite and constructive. But I'd like you guys to put your thoughts in the chat. By you guys, I mean the participants, and maybe have some of the folks who are helping out tonight managing the chat, meaning our board members and our interns this evening, because I actually cannot see the chat right now. Give us some thoughts, like do some quick reading of the chats and maybe identify some themes for what you see in the chat, or read some highlights so we can get a little bit of a feel of who's in the room. So if we can just take a minute to do that before we start. And once we've seen a little bit in the chat, we'll start with Jordan and ask him to give us sort of do a little level setting with us and tell us what he is seeing with the bill. I don't mean what he's seeing with the bill, but tell us a little bit about the bill and give us his thoughts in the bill so we can start with that, sort of some grounding. And Saray, we're not going to take any questions or comments now. We'll do that later on, and then we'll open it up for some conversation with everybody. After we've heard from all the panelists for a bit, then we'll open it up to everybody for a conversation. So we will have a real interactive portion of this conversation, but it won't be for a little bit. We're going to hear from the panelists first. Okay, I don't know how much has been in the chat yet. Do we want to give people a little bit more time?
We're getting a mix of opinions, both saying it's very important for housing, saying that it might be misused. Some people saying they're not in favor of state mandates for land use, and you know, some concerns of how it will affect transit. A couple of people mentioned the gondola. So we're getting people from all sides of the issue, and quite a few people also saying they're looking forward to learning more.
Okay, great. Thank you. That sounds like a great synopsis. Anybody else? I just realized my battery wasn't plugged in, so that was not great. Do any of the other folks watching the chat want to chime in with anything else they want to supplement Charles's summary with? Okay.
Really quick, I think there are a few comments around, green space and, parking and other, infrastructure issues, and, just wondering if the community character is going to be preserved, things like that.
Okay, so appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you a lot, Andrews. Okay, great. I think we're ready to hand it over to Jordan, who's going to do some opening up, sort of level setting, giving us some grounding, and then we'll hear from the rest of the panelists for a bit, and then we'll open it up to all the participants who are here. All right. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Jordan. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, I'll do a very brief introduction of myself and our organization, and then get into SB 79. I'll try not to yak too much so that we can actually get to the conversation. Really great to be here with you all this evening. My name is Jordan Grimes. I am the State and Regional Resilience Manager for Greenbelt Alliance. We are an environmental nonprofit in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, have been around since 1958, focused on climate resilience, conservation, and sustainable land use policy. And there are really, I would say, three sort of reasons that we have focused on and are sponsoring SB 79 this year. First, I will say that this is the first time we have ever sponsored a piece of state legislation. We have traditionally worked at the local and regional level on general plans, specific plans, downtown plans, climate action plans, any kind of local planning or regional planning effort we have probably worked on, especially when it comes to things like urban growth boundaries, really trying to shepherd growth, new growth in the state of California into the right places, trying to ensure the state builds in a more sustainable way than it really has for the last 75 years. Greenbelt Alliance developed our first housing working group in 1978 to try and figure out ways that environmentalists and housing advocates could work together. And we really see this as the culmination of our work. And so the three sort of impending crises that we see and that lead us to jump into this arena for the first time are the housing crisis. We recognize that there is a tremendous shortage of homes in California that have driven prices sky high. We recognize that there is a climate and biodiversity crisis. We are losing more and more natural and working lands to exurban sprawl and development every year. We are seeing more and more species and habitat threatened. We are seeing more and more greenhouse gases emitted, not fewer. We're decidedly on the wrong track. And then the final crisis that is somewhat unique in the last several years relates to public transit, in that we know that many transit systems have not bounced back after the pandemic. We know that people are taking transit in different ways than they have before. We know that people are working differently. And that means that our systems that once ran in a certain way now face some pretty severe difficulties. Transit all across the state has primarily relied on operating budgets have primarily relied on fare box revenue rather than state funding or other outside sources. And so the reality is that with fewer people riding, our transit systems are in danger, which is a tremendous problem, not only for low-income communities to get around, but especially for our climate goals. We absolutely need to get people out of cars. We absolutely need to get people riding public transit. Right now, about 40% of California's emissions come from the transportation sector. Another 10% if you consider manufacturing of those automobiles necessary to get people around. And so it is, I think, fundamental that we are able to get people on public transit. And a big part of that is ensuring that people are able to live near public transit, which brings us to SB 79. So the bill does two primary things. The first is an allowance, a zoning allowance within half a mile of major public transit stations. And I think I saw some of this in the chat, but because I think someone mentioned the gondola, no, gondolas are not in California law considered a major public transit station in California. What we are talking about are fixed rail stations. That is both heavy rail as well as light rail. Bus rapid transit, your just regular bus stop does not qualify, and I'll get to the definition of bus rapid transit in a minute. And then ferry terminals as well. And so the bill says if you have a parcel within a half mile of one of these stations, you can build an apartment building. You can build, taller and denser than you otherwise could under, previous law. We recognize that this is a big shift in the way that California has developed, but we believe it to be a necessary one. The other thing, I think critical thing that the bill does that is less talked about is that we give transit agencies authority to build on the land that they own. So for example, right now, if a transit agency, be it BART in the Bay Area, LA Metro, MTS in San Diego, if they owned a parking lot, for example, or another parcel that they wanted to develop, they would have to abide by local rules and regulations. What SB 79 essentially does is gives those agencies the authority to build what they wish on those properties. There is still a local process included, but you would not need to comply with things like local zoning ordinances. That is the crux of the bill. I will say that the bill operates on a tiered system, which means that there are different heights and densities, new heights and densities allowed based on two things: the proximity of the parcel to the public transit stop and the capacity of the public transit system or stop in question itself. So for example, if you have an apartment building that is near a grade separated light rail line or a heavy rail line or station. And sorry, I'm saying line, but we're talking about the stations themselves and not the entire line, but within that half-mile radius of the station. Within the first quarter mile, you would get to build a certain amount and a certain height, and that tapers off for the second quarter mile, essentially recognizing that the closer you are, we know that people are more likely to be willing to walk to those stations. And so recognizing that the farther you go, the less you get. Similarly, with the capacity of the system, if you have a ferry terminal, for example, we recognize that people are going to ride less than they are a major train station. And so you get less height and less density allowed based on the capacity of those systems. So those are sort of the key highlights of the bill over the course of the legislative session. Since the bill's introduction in January, we have taken a series of amendments that I'm happy to go over, from affordability, increased affordability levels, to stronger anti-displacement protections, to minimum densities to prevent the bill from being used to create sprawl in places that we don't want it to be used, to additional amendments to allow local flexibility. There are two provisions in the bill around really allowing locals to have some control, jurisdictions that are building, that we know are building in a meaningful way. We really do try to delineate between jurisdictions that are making a concerted effort to be part of solving the housing crisis and jurisdictions that aren't. So we have created additional amendments from where the bill started to essentially allow jurisdictions that have already upzoned or create additional capacity for new housing to get credit for that in the bill. And with that, I think I've been yakking for about 10 minutes now. So I will go ahead and let others speak. I know we have a lot to get to, but I'm happy to answer questions. That's the bill, and happy to talk more.
Thank you, Jordan. One question that I've gotten a lot and that I think I have asked also, and I should have mentioned earlier also, Anders has been really, really helpful in putting together this event and helping get me educated on this issue. Is there a map? Because it does seem to me, and I'll be honest, I don't at this moment have a strong position on the bill myself. It seems like the devil's in the details. So, and it seems like the details are very hard to pin down. So is there a map so we can see like what those tiers are? Because it seems like, it depends on the capacity, and it depends on your proximity to these stations and their capacity, which means like for me personally, like I don't know, and I'm a renter, so there's that. But like it seems like it's hard to know exactly what would be where. So a map would be super, super, super helpful.
Yeah, I will have to talk to our partner organizations. I don't actually know the answer. I would assume there is one. But really, we have been looking at it based on station. It's I think fairly easy to play around with Google and figure out what that half-mile radius looks like. But I'll happily check with our partners and get back to you, Lisa.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you could figure out the half-mile radius, but doesn't it depend on the capacity of each station? And like, so isn't it more complicated than that?
It's a little more complicated. I mean, it depends, what transit stop you're talking about. So,
Right.
for example, if you have a fixed rail, high capacity tier 1 station, and the bill explains in specific language what stops and what types of systems qualify for the different tiers. There are 3 tiers specifically. And the bill does explain sort of, what each of those are and what the density allowances are for those. And so you could look up and say, okay, my apartment is a quarter mile from this LA Metro line. That qualifies as tier 1. That means that you have an allowance of 7 stories and a maximum of 120 units an acre. That's what that allows. If you look up and you see, oh, my apartment is, or my home is within a sixth, or is within, is further out than that, you can see that you'll get maybe 5 to 6 stories and 80 units an acre.
Lisa, can I share? I have a map up that shows.
Okay, sure. Yeah, let me. Yes.
And
Okay.
I'll have to move it a little because I realize
We'll
the
move
Zoom.
to Stacy and then we'll, okay. Oh, wait, I did that wrong. Let me go back and let you screen share. Yeah. And then we'll go to Chris and then we'll go to Laura. Okay. Sure. You should be able to screen
I can do
share.
it. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So if I can zoom out a little bit, and this was, I'm sorry, prepared by an organization out of San Diego, but we have Redondo Beach down here. So we have the CD 15 down to here. Anything that's got blue highlighting is within a zone that would be upgraded or upzoned. And then, of course, you have the various shades from red to yellow to green. So it goes from CD 15 down here. The peninsula, as you can see, is not got much upzoning. And then as we move north, we have the areas of red, the green, and the blue. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that we can see from the ocean, which is the Bologna Wetlands and Marina del Rey, to all of CD 11 over here. And this is the VA over here to give you a point. So here we have CD 5 stretching over towards Hollywood, Koreatown. South of there, you've got CD 10 all throughout here. And then moving over to downtown LA area and the east side, and then up around Griffith Park to the CD1 areas out to Pasadena. And this would be the valley. So you've got along, as you can tell, right in here, Mulholland. And then you've got to Van Nuys. This is where this new line is going through. And it goes out to Chatsworth in the far west over here, and all the way up to Sylmar up here, just below Hanson Dam. So anything outlined with the blue was with all upzoned under the bill. And of course, as we just heard mentioned, with decreasing density, starting with the red to the green, and there's blue, and it's all based, even throughout the 405, you've got areas because you have bus stops that are here. So that would be in the area of the Santa Monica Mountains, although there is an exclusion. The only exclusion is for high fire severity zones. So in the hillside areas, will be no permissible upzoning.
Okay, okay,
Lisa,
I am getting feedback that this map is not accurate, and I do not know.
Oh.
But people
I
are saying
don't believe it is.
This
Okay.
is
this map
based
is in this is I'm sorry, but this is misinformation.
No, this
This
was
map
built
is
out of
showing
only
high
for reality
quality
out of
transit
San
areas, which is
Diego.
it's a
Okay,
different,
let's-
I'm sorry, it's a different map.
And
This
the
is not-
Argus map, I'll point out that the Argus map that they use, which was pointed out to me by somebody from the Department of Planning, is actually the Argus map we have at the city of LA, but I just can't access it from this computer. So this underlying map is the Argus map that has been presented to various departments at the city of LA as well.
Presented by whom?
Department of City Planning, LA Department of Housing, everybody within the city who has access to the Argus maps. And what they did was they just entered the stops and then they did the grading. So this is not one organization that created
These
it.
are high quality transit area stops.
I understand.
These are bus stops. It is defined by how frequently the buses stop
Yes.
during the commute
That's correct.
hours. It is not the SB 79 definition. This is
Yeah.
not it.
As you can see.
And this is not,
my
I'm sorry,
area,
this is not a credible source, and it is not an accurate source.
As you
I'm
can
going to
see
let you
in
continue, but I have to correct the misinformation when I say it.
This
Okay.
actually
So we're-
is, if you look based upon the stops, this is Culver Boulevard, this is Sepulveda. So when you do zone in, it does show you by TOC tiers, this is Sepulveda Boulevard, this is the half mile, this is the quarter mile. The yellows, which are right here, which also serve as community center areas along this stretch in our housing element. And if you'll note, they're all the stops on the major streets. That's what the dots are. It is the color that shows you the distance out from the high frequency bus stops or from the rail lines. And every single dot that you see in here are the bus stops and the transportation points. So you have to zone in. So you'll see that in here, you're within a half mile of several things, but it isn't the highest density. It would be the dark blue areas. And all this is showing you is the transportation stops that qualify under SB 79. That's why I said early on, you have to zoom in to see the details.
Okay, unfortunately, I am getting so many people having a strong reaction to this map that a strong negative reaction.
I'll stop
is-
sharing. It's not a problem, but there are plenty out there, and I believe the Argus map will be made available through the city of LA, but I don't know when, but I think it'll go up on the Department of City Planning's website.
Okay. So, I don't know enough to have an opinion, but enough people, there are a lot of very well-versed people here on this issue who are saying that there's a problem with this map. So I think we should
Okay.
put a pin in it metaphorically and move away from the map because I can't. That's
We've
all.
asked the Department of City Planning, and I believe it'll go live very soon, that they've got their own maps and data that they're putting on that's only for the city of LA, so it's easier to focus in or to pull back to look at the zoning.
And Glenn does have a good point. The best way to counter the problem. So Stacy, did you want to share, since you have been speaking, would you like to share your thoughts on the
Yeah. I'll start with
SB9?
what I shared with Lisa the other day. I am one of the authors of the developers sustainable guidelines, so I am looking at this from a sustainable viewpoint as well as an economic, which we can't ignore. I don't have a position on SB 79. I believe that housing is a human right and we have a severe housing shortage. But I will also tell you in my work with tenants and preservation of affordable housing, we need affordable, affordable, affordable. 13% is not high enough. I also have a problem with our TOC. I've always had a problem with the percentage of affordable housing that we are creating, and I'll always advocate for more affordable housing because at the numbers that we're seeing in this bill and others, it's not going to meet the need that is critical to keep people off the streets. My biggest overwhelming concern before I get to sustainability is the money. The elephant in the room is the city of Los Angeles is in a very bad state. So is the state. And we can't anticipate, unfortunately, any federal funds whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they're tightening and they're taking away our grants. With that in mind, we need more transportation. And it's always been an argument, are we putting the carrot before the cart or vice versa? And this went back to the Sustainable Developers Guidelines. We had many interesting arguments over, do we build the infrastructure or do we try to accommodate for the infrastructure? I don't profess to have the answers, but I am always on the side of we need more transportation. What we have now is not sufficient for what we're trying to build out for, and there is no money appropriated in this, and simply saving what we have is not sufficient for our future needs and for my children's needs. I do know that I live off of a line where it is not safe for us to ride downtown. I've had incidences. There was someone stabbed to death at my stop downtown. Security is a major concern, but we don't plan for transportation here. It is upzoning for proposed transportation. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to remain the advocate for we need to spend our money on transportation, including secure bike lanes. As the Netherlands have told Mayor Garcetti when I was at the meeting, if it's not secure, people will not ride their bikes. We need more rail, we need more bus lines, and we need more security. Having said that, the money for the infrastructure, including the trash, electricity, water, we're losing our one trash dump soon, for everything that goes into accommodating this kind of density has not been planned for, and it is not paid for in the bill. My biggest concern are our low-income tenants who are being displaced and who's going to pay. It won't be the feds, it won't be the state, it won't be the city. It will pass on to apartment dwellers and to taxpayers. And I think most of us can say we can barely afford things now. So that money is the elephant in the room for the infrastructure that we need. For sustainability, I've been advocating for over 10 years for an urban wildfire ordinance. When you look at townhomes or apartments, for instance, in Philadelphia, where you have one unit that catches fire, you'll then see the entire block goes up. That's because we have a 4,600-degree temperature in a fire in a home, and the spread is up to 12 to 18 feet for immediate combustion of the neighboring property. And with our recent fires, this has taken on more severity. We are going to reduce setbacks, increase density without an urban wildfire spread ordinance, and we greatly need it. And that is for safety of the human occupants. It's safety for our city, so we don't have a catastrophic fire that has a negative impact. That's number one. Two, the setbacks. This density is not, there's no denying it will create urban heat, a loss of species, and a loss of wildlife habitat. I'd like to see that addressed in a bill like this. I think there's a way we can plan for increased density and still protect those elements. And the most important thing that I find is missing in a climate conscious planning environment is no consideration for zero carbon building materials or low carbon building materials. The offsetting of gases with what we will use to create this density is devastating for our environment. And I'd like to see the bill include truly more sustainable measures. And the last point I wanted to raise, according to the Trust for Public Land, LA now ranks 88 out of 100 major cities in the United States for park access, equity to green spaces, acreage, investment, and amenities. We know that when we upzone, the parcels that cost the least are targeted first, and that will happen in the lowest cost neighborhoods. That's what happens. They're not going to buy a parcel on the west side for $3 million to tear down the house and build. They're going to target where that pro forma is going to pencil out at a lower cost per unit. And that means displacement in our culturally sensitive, historic colors of community, our lowest income people who have been afforded the opportunity for homeownership. And I'm very concerned about the displacement, and I'm very concerned about the inequities that it would create. I'd like to see that addressed more in a bill, so we're doing actual land use planning. I do think that we should all be cognizant that we just completed our housing element all the way through the CHIPS ordinance, which greatly upzones a large part of our city on major boulevards and streets, particularly in high opportunity zones, including on the west side. And we are seeing developments here as a result of that already. And I think that this negates the housing element that we spent a lot of time and millions on getting certified. And I think it takes away our local control and our ability to implement the ordinances in the housing element that we created that provides the necessary housing that is anticipated, including the affordable housing, and gives incentives. And I'd like to see that work, and we spend the money on transportation that's needed and infrastructure. So when we hit the ground with upzoning, we're ready for it and there aren't negative consequences. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Stacy. Okay, now we're going to go to Chris, who looks like he's ready to chime in.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for having me here. I think having these conversations are very important, and especially when we come from different viewpoints, because I think we're here because it's a sustainability alliance. So ultimately, we care about the health of our planet and the communities that we live in. Just a little bit more about my background. I am a sole practitioner. I'm an urban planning consultant, trained in urban planning at MIT, also an energy manager in my past life. I'm speaking today on behalf of Urban Environmentalists, a grassroots organization that's dedicated to sustainable land use, where I'm one of the co-chairs. In my professional life, I've led the sustainability plan for LA County, the climate action plans for West Hollywood, Tucson, Minneapolis, St. Paul, New York City, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm a consultant to the U.S. Green Building Council on Sustainable Cities, the New York City Mayor's Office on Environmental Justice, and the California Governor's Office on Climate Resilience. I'm also the past president of the Westside Urban Forum based here in LA, and you can find me at the USGBC California Living Futures Committee. I say all this to state that in my professional life, I've been deeply steeped in this work. And in my personal life, my family history and how I came to the housing conversation is that my mother's family moved to LA in 1971 to a family of 5 to a 1-bedroom apartment in Koreatown. Koreatown is a neighborhood that has the least amount of parks per capita in probably all the United States and a historical burden of traffic pollution. And it is bearing a disproportionate share of new development today. Like, this is what drives me and why I care about this issue. I happened to grow up, my family, when by the time that I was growing up, I lived in a single family home. And in my adult life, I've lived in missing middle apartment buildings. I've lived in large mixed income buildings, and now I live in a townhome style development. Like, we can be all these different things. I've been a lifelong bike commuter, a transit rider. I share a vehicle with my wife. Yes, I do drive a car. And so, like, these identities that I think a lot of times folks are eager to put us into, like, they're kind of false, right? They're kind of these false constructs. And like, we can be all of these things and live in community with one another. I also want to share the stories of like some of my family friends. My friend's mother, who has worked as a career public servant, as an administrative assistant in the county of LA, who grew up in what is now who raised her children in what is now East Hollywood. She couldn't afford to keep her apartment. She moved to Fontana. And then another family friend who raised her family in South Pasadena ended up moving to Victorville. And like, this is the reality. So that map that we saw, accuracy issues aside, it's an incomplete picture, because when we don't accommodate urban infill in the transit rich, in the temperate climate areas of Los Angeles, that demand doesn't disappear. It spills over into our suburbs. It spills over into Lancaster and Palmdale and Victorville and Hesperia. And that means paving over farmland and habitat. It means increasing wildfire risk for the region at large and pushing people further from jobs and services. And so from a climate change lens, it's really important that we promote as much infill transit-oriented development as we can accommodate. Longer commutes are, of course, are more vehicle miles traveled, it's more air pollution, and it's locking transportation as the region's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. It, of course, has an impact on housing costs, and let's talk about infrastructure and what it means. Because to provide infrastructure in Victorville or Hesperia means spending more per household on roads, on utilities, and emergency services per household, because they're far spread further apart. It means building new infrastructure instead of relying upon what is already there. And so that's more carbon, that's more resources, that's more material that we could instead be reinvesting into our existing communities and making them more accessible to more people. So it's really this climate goal is something that urban environmentalists, we've really been trying to say that, like, if we as Los Angeles, if we are serious about climate change, yes, we have to care about building decarbonization. Yes, we have to think about electrification of the transportation sector. But by far, the most important thing we can do, and the thing that Los Angeles has the most control over, is infill development. It is transit-oriented development. And so far, we've been falling far short of where we need to be. We're 450,000 housing units short of where we need to be in the next 8 years. Oh, I'm sorry, that was starting in 2021. We need to build 450,000 housing units by 2029 in order to meet the demand. And so for this reason, like, this is why urban environmentalists care so much about this issue and why we are strong supporters of SB 79. Talk about VMT, talk about these targets. I think that's a pretty good place to start. The last thing that I wanted to say is that, we're here to talk about sustainability, but we haven't defined it yet. For me, the most fundamental definition is the Brundtland Commission. In 1987, the World Commission on Environmental Development issued a report, and it's a very simple statement. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. How are we meeting the needs of the present and without compromising the ability of future generations? And right now we are in a situation where Los Angeles is deeply unaffordable to so many people. Again, that demand doesn't just disappear. It doesn't go to other regions. It goes to the far-flung exurbs of Southern California. And so we need to think about how we are providing for not just who's in the room today, but who isn't here yet. What are our future generations? And where are they going to live? I know so many people now who have raised their children in Los Angeles and say they can't afford to have their children move back. And we drastically need to rethink about what we are doing as a city, as a region, and as a community so that we can accommodate more Angelenos to thrive where they are and to grow old here. Because I think there's so much that we love about LA, and we have to adapt it with the times in order to move ahead. So I'm going to pause there. I know there's lots to talk about, and we'll get into the discussion, but thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. That was very, very eloquent and from the heart. I really appreciate that. Okay, Laura, would love to hear your perspective and Communities for a Better Environment's perspective. And I know Communities for a Better Environment is part of a very large coalition that has concerns about the bill. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you. My name is Laura, use she, they pronouns. I'm the legal advocate at CBE. I also grew up in Los Angeles. When my parents migrated here from Mexico, we were in Hollywood in one of those like small like units with like 3 other families. So while my parents figured out like how to find like a place we stayed there for a few years. My parents separated. My mom moved to Koreatown. We were living in Koreatown. I always rep Koreatown because it's the place that I remember growing up in. We moved to Montebello. We moved back to LA, Koreatown, and now we're in Highland Park. I say that because I've also moved around Los Angeles, and my mom did not have like a car as I was growing up. So someone asked in the chat, like, does anyone even take transit? Yeah, we do take transit. I remember like carrying a little backpack, and I always had snacks and activities to do on the bus. And I share this because it's the story of a lot of low income, a lot of migrant, a lot of single parent families. Is transit is really incredibly important. And so I do want to tie that into, we do have concerns about the bill. We're currently opposed unless amended, and I'm gonna run through some of those amendments. But yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles. I started off as a youth organizer. I worked as a climate adaptation and resilience enhancement coordinator. So I work to build resilience hubs. And then I was like, it'd be cool if I became a lawyer. So I'm doing a legal apprenticeship program with CBE. So not going to law school, just a lot of self-study. And so as I'm doing this work, CBE, we organize in Wilmington and the Southeast Los Angeles cities like Cudahy, Maywood, Huntington Park. We also work in East Oakland and in Richmond up in the Bay Area. So we're an environmental justice organization, and we believe that everyone should have access to clean air, clean water, clean soil, healthy communities, obviously safe housing. And so when we're thinking about housing, we understand that there's a need to create more of it, but we also ultimately, at the root of environmental justice, is it needs to be equitable. It needs to address historical harms that have been caused to people of color, specifically Black and brown communities. We understand that climate change is happening. Again, like I've spent a lot of my professional life doing research on climate change, talking with community members about what extreme heat really feels like. You can look at the data, you can really think about the projections and the mapping, but listening directly to community members about how it feels to wake up, walk your dog, take the bus to work, have the bus be late, have no shading at your bus stop or no trees. And in environmental justice communities, we don't have, a lot of trees, And on top of that, folks are living near polluting industries like refineries, neighborhood oil drilling, metal dismantlers. These are, LA is not a monolith. There are a lot of deeply rooted environmental racism just truly still exists in the city of Los Angeles and obviously the world. And so we can't, when we're talking about building out housing, it needs to address how communities have actually historically been built and what folks are really facing in the moment. So, we care about transit, we care about housing near transit. Again, it needs to be equitable. It needs to also support community stability. All my brothers have moved out of Los Angeles because they couldn't afford it. And actually, I was going to share one of our community members. She had a single mom. Her sister had a developmental disorder. And so when like our member would try to go to our community events, and a lot of times she did, and she brought her sister. But then a lot of times she had to leave, she's single mom. She had to, her mom was a single mom, and, the caretaker like had to leave. And so she would have to run home. They had to ultimately like leave Los Angeles. And, we were in Wilmington. Wilmington is slightly cheaper. It's getting, there's a lot of displacement going on in Wilmington regardless. now, but they had to leave the state. And so I really want to uplift that, you know, you are ripping families apart by not building equitable housing, by not building affordable, deeply affordable housing, and really investing in communities, by building green transit, by expanding access to green spaces. It really is it really is disorienting, you know, and as we know that climate change is happening, we need these support systems. We need social cohesion in order to support one another and mitigate the harms from climate impacts. And I guess I'll just name a few of our amendments that we're hoping to see. You know, we really want to see, you know, we want to require developers to include additional affordable housing, to use the state density bonus law. We need additional concessions based on the type of transit stop a project is located near. We really want to see a minimum 55-year affordability term for affordable rental units, and require that affordable units use a rent schedule applicable under density state bonus law. I have so many, maybe I'll put them into the chat. But you know, there's been a lot of changes that have happened to the bill. We are hoping to continue working with the authors to incorporate the amendments. And yeah, ultimately we need to make sure we're building equitable housing to not recreate the harms of the past.
Okay, thank you. We are, and I told Chris and Jordan that at some point it was inevitable that I'd be saying I was getting anxious about time, and we have gotten to that point. So although I would love to be able to have some more conversation among the four of you, I think at this point, I would like to open it up to all the participants, because there are a lot of them. And I know, you know, as you can tell from the chat, a lot of them are super educated on this topic and eager to chime in. So I would like to open it up to them and get into it. So let's do that. So I'm going to open up to Charles, even though he's a board member, and I should open it up to somebody else first.
I don't have to go first,
Well,
but I'll be quick. I'll be
okay.
quick. Okay,
Charles.
so thank you all the panelists for your input this evening. In addition to the other stuff I said I'm involved with at the beginning of the conversation, I am on the LA County Metro Sustainability Council. And there are several things about LA Metro that are different from a lot of the other transportation systems in the city or in the state. One of them is that we're not really completely fare dependent like a lot of the rest of the state is. In fact, we're less fare dependent than any other system in the country. In fact, we could make Metro free for everybody financially if we wanted to. The only reason we don't is because they want to use the fare as a security measure to decrease people loitering there. That's a whole other different conversation. But the point is, one of the issues that I constantly find when we're trying to deal with sustainable development on Metro is with respect to the zoning issues that are somewhat addressed in SB 79, that Metro has great biodiversity guidelines. Metro has great goals with respect to sustainability, but they generally punt when it comes to what the municipalities want when there is any development that is in the TOD. This does expand the authority from Metro, but the problem that I see in working with Metro on the Sustainability Council is that they often don't want that responsibility. They're actually afraid of it. They want to build their bus lines and build their trains and have the numbers go up of everybody who rides it. And they don't want to have the real serious hard discussions. So it's actually a really convenient thing for them that they can say, you know, we don't want to do something that's going to anger Culver City or anger Beverly Hills or anything along those lines. We have a tremendous opportunity with LA Metro right now because of all systems in the entire country. We're going through the biggest growth of any of them. And so I'm curious if the panel could tell me, with respect to a very LA-centric question, when LA Metro doesn't want to do these expansions because they're afraid of angering the municipalities, how do we think that 79 can make this system work better for everybody?
Okay, I can just jump in quickly. You know, I would say, yeah, obviously, you know, you can't. I'm not sure if my video just went off. It looks like it did. Cool. Love Zoom.
We can still hear you, though you're frozen.
Great. I'll just keep talking then. I think what I'll say is that this is why Greenbelt Alliance focuses so much on both local, regional, and state level work. There are things that we can give people authority to do. We obviously cannot force Metro to act in a more sustainable way. That really is where local organizing comes in. That said, giving, all we can really do is give the agency the power to do things. I will say that we have had I am less familiar with the LA Metro response. We've had, I think, significant positive response from MTS in San Diego. We have several of the Bay Area transit agencies signed on, and good conversations with Sacramento RT as well. So I think at the end of the day, really all we can do is create the conditions necessary that will allow for us to take more sustainable actions. But that does not negate, none of this negates the need for more action on the local level, for sure.
Nothing further. I think we can go to the next question.
Yeah, I was frozen. Not great. Mike.
Hey everybody, how are you? Thanks first of all for putting on the forum. Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. And as some of you know, I'm running for state senate, and I get this question about SB 79 at every meeting I go to, and sometimes 2 and 3 times from different people on opposite sides of it. I come at it from very much being a fan of increased density and having to build housing where appropriate. And as some of you might know, I was vice president of the LA City Planning Commission for several years. But my question is this, because my own research is confusing me a bit. And of course, depending on who you talk to, I feel like you sometimes maybe get a loaded answer. But my question is this. First of all, of the TOC tiers, do TOC tier 3 stops qualify for SB 79? It seems to me that they do, but I just wanted to get clarification.
They do. So
They
do
do.
TOC 2 and 1.
I know 2 and 1 for sure do. I had heard different about 3. Okay, that's great to know. And then the other issue is obviously based on the TOC, you can obviously go out different levels into, whether we can go 7 stories or down, obviously. If those concentric circles from the TOC go into R1 or 1.5 neighborhoods, you would still be able to build by right apartment buildings on an otherwise R1 or 1.5 lot, correct?
That is correct. It's
That's
in
right.
reduced density and height the further out you go.
Right.
Oh,
And the only carve
partially
out in the
correct.
bill, just real quick, the only carve out in the bill currently is for high fire severity zones, and I think some historic districts, right?
No historic districts,
No
only high
historic at
fire
all.
severity. We're asking for
Okay.
that amendment.
Okay,
Okay.
wait, there was a response in the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Jordan, because there was a different response.
I was just going to vocalize Mark's point that most of that is right, except for as it pertains to the by right provision. The bill is not by right. You still have to go through the regular planning process, unless you opt to also invoke SB 423, SB 35, at which point you have to include significantly steeper labor provisions, significantly steeper affordability requirements, et cetera. So the bill is only by right in that instance. The normal process, if you were to propose a SB 79 project, you would still have to go through the normal process without using SB 79 or without using SB 35 or SB 423.
Okay, so that's helpful, Jordan. And then just one quick follow-up though. When you say you have to still go through the process, meaning, all right, you're within a quarter mile of a qualifying TOC. You're in an R1 neighborhood. A developer comes in and says, I'm going to take, a standard lot in that neighborhood. I'm going to put 10 units up, whatever it might be. What part of the planning process, and not that I necessarily, whether people want to stop it or not is not the point. what would potentially be able to stop that from a neighbor's point of view? Because I'm just getting a lot of concern out there. People say, you know, this is great, this is wonderful on heavy commercial corridors, mixed use corridors, big TOCs. I'm a little worried I'm going to get 10 units next door to my house. And it's obviously a little bit complicated. So I'm trying to get a better handle on that so I can.
Mike, they didn't change anything from the current requirements for expedited processing that's in the HCA. So it would only be based upon a negative impact upon, under certain objective findings on the local area. That's environmental impacts, that would be negative, but it's the same as the HCA. So that didn't change.
So it's still a discretionary process to build what theoretically I was just talking about building.
It is
No.
still a discretionary process. You can still challenge the project under the Housing Accountability Act if there are health and safety concern. There are still other ways to challenge the project, but it is going to be a more difficult it is going to be a more difficult task ahead of you.
Okay, so it's still discretionary, but the discretion has greatly narrowed.
Yes,
in
I think
R1s and
other laws have.
R1.5s.
Yes, other laws over the last 10 years have narrowed that discretion, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we were just talking about the chip. We were just talking about the housing element. I mean, it is a lot of that has happened anyway. But okay, that's very helpful. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, God, you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
Hope
This is
that
the
was
time.
raving for all of us, Jordan.
And okay, Tony, go ahead, and I should have said this earlier, please do introduce yourself. You've been doing a good job, but please, for everybody, introduce yourself.
Sure.
When you
Hi, I'm Tony Gittleson. I'm a housing advocate. I'm a co-author of the Little Communities Initiative, which is for gentle density housing around, transit corridors and transitional corridors. And I'm on the just newly elected to the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council. I wanted to follow up on Mike Newhouse's question because I thought the bill had been amended that is now only includes tier 1 transit, meaning a metro and express bus lanes. So that's misinformation, and I was there. It has not been amended.
There were some amendments around the tiers, but not for places like LA County. So there were amendments that lessen essentially what tier you're in. Essentially, if you are not in what is deemed an urban transit county, which depends on the number of trains running per day, tier 3 is what applies in your county. But for counties like LA, Santa Clara County, San Diego County, you are still eligible for the full suite.
Oh, okay. I dropped into the chat. I created my own map with a half-mile and quarter-mile concentric circle from my area, which is the new Wilshire La Brea stop. And I will say, I mean, I am definitely pro-housing, especially pro-housing around transit. I want to like this bill, but if you move it to various transit stops, a half and a quarter mile, it will substantially encroach into basically every R1 neighborhood where there's a transit stop. And that would also include, again, some clear express bus lanes or, going.
If I can help clarify, if you don't
Sure.
mind what Jordan said, because I have the bill up, and this is a very good distinction when it comes to the different tiers. So the most recent amendment, you've got your tier 1 transit-oriented development stops, which we all know what that is. And because we are an urban transit county, it applies to LA, and that would be the heavy rail transit or very high-frequency commuter rail. That doesn't include the bus stops in the tier 1. Tier 2 transit-oriented development stop means transit-oriented development stop within our county, excluding a tier 1 transit-oriented development stop that's served by light rail transit, high-frequency commuter rail, or by bus service, meeting the standards that we already have in the Public Resources Code. The tier 3 development stop is one that excludes a tier 1 or tier 2 transit, it's narrowing, oriented development stop that's served by rail or ferry, and those are particularly designed for any transit-oriented development stop that serves bus transit or a major transit stop. So you see what they are accommodating various forms of transit that could accommodate more people. and that is in the bill.
I'll just add this, and again, I am definitely pro housing. LA needs it. But I am concerned that when neighbors, in the greater Wilshire who live in residential neighborhoods say they can put up a 5 to 7 story building, in our neighborhood, the answer is going to be yes, they can. Is there a consensus among the panelists that that's basically true, depending on if you're a quarter, a half mile away?
Yeah, that is essentially true. And I don't think anyone has ever proposed otherwise. What we are saying and how we come to this conversation is we are making some trade-offs here. We are making the trade-off that it is better to develop in the R1s, that it is better to develop near transit than the current development patterns that California has, which is to build in the places that Chris talked about earlier, in the wildland urban interface, in places in the Central Valley, in the Inland Empire. What we're proposing is that instead of doing that, we focus our development in existing urban areas, and that is what the bill does.
Okay.
I know that makes some people uncomfortable, and we recognize that, but this is the trade-off,
Right.
that we're trying to get people to recognize from a sustainability perspective.
Thank you for the candid answer.
Yeah, thank you. Karen? Or Commissioner Waters?
Hello, everyone. My name is hi, Lisa. Thank you, and to Charles and your team for putting this on. Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Waters. I am the North Valley Commissioner from the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners and Vice President of the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners. I represent 17 neighborhood councils in the North San Fernando Valley. Roughly, the valley has 1.8 million people, and my neighborhood councils roughly represent about half of that. The concerns, look, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I've been in Los Angeles my whole life, and a resident of Council District 12 for 22 years. I don't deny that there, is housing needs and so forth. However, I'm going to be very transparent. The bill is flawed, and here's why. There are many neighborhoods that have one way in and one way out. Some may be as few as 5 homes, and other may be 30 to 100. Taking a lot that was, meant for and designed in a community plan that was for your average single family residence with one family to it gets me upset to even talk about it, to take over a neighborhood with 10 units in an aging infrastructure. As I'm sure you all have heard right now, we have infrastructure that failed, and we have about 31,000 people right now without water. Now that is coming back between the Porter Ranch and Granada Hills North, and part of Chatsworth communities. But speaking for, and I believe I see some of my neighborhood council members and presidents here, this has to be taken seriously, as well as the public safety component obviously was not factored, because in the event of an evacuation, as we Palisades, geographically, Palisades has some similarities to our North Valley neighborhoods, where there are limited access points to access inward and outward. And with something like this, to add more people and more cars, and everything was written on the assumption that everyone is going to take public transit, which is ludicrous, because I'm dealing with this in my own cul-de-sac. My neighbor across the street from me built an ADU. She took away the parking from the back of she had alley parking. She closed that off, built an ADU, and now there's people fighting to get parking spaces. In other neighborhoods, there are people practically, in some cases, fighting for parking. People cannot park in front of their own homes. due to the housing crisis, and I'm sure we all know this, there are multi-generational households already maybe living in a one home. So now next door, you're going to put a 10-unit apartment building with 10 more cars because people are not taking public transit. Okay. I personally am a season ticket holder for the Rams. I have to still drive to the train station to take the train to get to the shuttle to go to SoFi, to go to Crypto Arena. You still have to drive to a station to get to the train or the bus to the shuttle to get to an arena. So the assumption, look, I know it's well intended, you know, I live here too, but it wasn't thought out well. And in the event that someone that there is an earthquake, which was totally disregarded, there was a wildfire, and there's a need to evacuate, someone is going to be killed because we saw what happened in the Palisades. Okay. And I thank you for your presentation, but I'm just speaking as I've heard the voices of all of my neighborhood councils and many of the stakeholders in the community. I've been through more wildfires than I can possibly recall in my professional life and my life as a public servant. So I just do believe you're not going to alter human behavior. People drive cars here. This is Los Angeles. This is a place where people love their cars. It is a problem, but you're not going to change human behavior by writing a bill that assumes that people are going to stop driving their cars and everyone's going to take public transit. So again, I'm just saying, just keeping it real, as the kids say, because this is a great concern of mine. I've seen what has happened. I've been driving around my community in the North Valley. I'm a very active commissioner. I know what's going on in my neighborhood council districts. There are too many of these going on. I mean, people are fighting, okay? People are going to kill each other because they can't get parking. I mean, there's no place for people to park. And you're talking about adding more housing with no transit and expecting, I just don't understand it at all.
Karen,
it was well intended, but it's flawed.
let me ask
And
you
I'm
about
gonna,
that. Because this is fundamentally a bill about transit-oriented development. So when you say housing without transit, what do you mean?
you said as I understand, SB 910 and now this bill.
We're talking about 79, SB 79.
Okay, but the assumption is that people are going to are not going to drive cars.
Well, this applies where there is transit service already.
Right, but and I understand that. And there's a monstrous development that I looked at, that I saw today. Then there's another one around the corner from us. They are not going to take the bus. There are no buses. There's like maybe a bus or two. So the assumption that people are going to take a bus where there are no buses, I mean, or there's one bus, it's just not going to happen. People have to drive to downtown LA from the North Valley. There isn't, this is not New York. That's my point. We don't have that type of transit system. We don't have that type of capability here. So the assumption that people are going to drive cars, are going to take public transit and aren't going to use cars is not accurate. And the maps are not accurate, by the way, as well. That should be pushed. You should allow every neighborhood council district, each neighborhood council should be allowed to weigh in on that because they know their neighborhoods much better than you all do.
Okay,
And this is Stacy, and I'd say I'm not as progressive as some others on the panel, so let's get that clear. I hear what you're saying, and it goes back to the argument of the carrot versus the cart. And I don't make my opinions based upon what I want and what I'm used to. It's what my children need. And my children's future depends upon us as a city and as a state coming up with a way to get past the automobile. That's just reality. But how we do it is where we're differing. And what I'd love to see is this bill provide more money for infrastructure and security so all of us would feel comfortable to give up our cars and make that a way of living our lives. I just think that we're omitting that. But I think we're all at the same goal. It's a question at this point of will this bill move us closer to that? or not. And I will tell you, the Turner Center at UCLA did a study on the TOC developments on the west side here, and we've increased density around me tremendously. And we were shocked to find out that the Turner Center study showed that instead of people owning less cars, they owned more, those that were residing in the TOC developments. The automobile is a problem. We don't have safe, secure infrastructure to meet the needs we would hope for. My problem is that we're building before we have that infrastructure, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to say that you raise valuable concerns, but every time even I think about we're fighting over parking spaces, we need parking, I cringe inside because the answer is we shouldn't. But I
Okay.
heard your concerns and I
I
will
beg your
listen
pardon.
to them.
I beg your pardon. But you said we shouldn't. But if you have, like, I keep, again, I am very informed about what's happening in my district. Okay. People are fighting now because in one case, someone built one of these multiple units and
I need to, I'm sorry, but I
okay,
need to
go ahead.
now I'm even more anxious about time than I was, and I was anxious.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
But thank you for letting me speak, Lisa.
Yes, of course, of course, of course. All right,
Can I just
Diana,
respond real quick?
very quickly.
So I don't think I understood Karen's like thought, but it did bring up a tangential thought. I think one of the other issues with SB 79 is it's, the language is overly complicated and it kind of does undermine local programs that do have equity focused approach. For example, someone already mentioned the Citywide Housing Incentive Program, which has really clear thresholds for low income, extremely low, very low income. It really does a good job at really incorporating equity. It also does require, an environmental assessment before building. And so the piece of, like, I understand that the development would not be happening in the Pacific Palisades because there is no major transit there, but it would be happening in Wilmington. We have a major transit stop or on the Silver Line. And it is pretty close to where, like maybe a decade ago now, there was a huge pipeline spill. Crude oil went into people's homes. It went into the street. Just a few years ago, there was a different pipeline that burst. Also spilling into the street. There was no proper remediation for those sites, and it was during a rainy season. People were wading through, like waddling through that like oil mixture water. And so I do think that that is one of the drawbacks of SB 79 is that it does undermine potential local protections that really include equity focused thresholds for affordability, and also it does streamline a lot. Like I heard you all say that it's not, discretionary, but because, like, as Jordan said, because of other CEQA bills because of other bills that have undermined CEQA, there aren't proper environmental assessments to really build healthy housing near oil, near polluting industries. So I do think that is another issue.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, Diana. So we have.
Hey,
we
thank
have
you,
one,
Lisa.
two,
And I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I can't seem to get my face off of this. So, by the way, thank you so much for the person who just spoke. I'm happy you butted in. You've raised some excellent points. I am an urban landscape ecologist professional. I specialize in the high fire severity zone. So my concern is growth in the danger zone. Many of my friends lost their homes in the recent LA fires. I think we all know what that has done to our city. SB 79 overrides local zoning to allow high-density, multi-story buildings within a half a mile of transit stops. I think we all agree that, but it does that even in the very high fire severity zones if developers opt out of the ministerial tract. And I want to be really clear. I work with the top Southern California fire ecologist, the top experts, and I'm currently in a group with some other folks that UCLA is facilitating to address what's happening in the high fire severity zones and policy. The distance between structures and the density of housing in communities significantly impact how fire spreads in areas where the wildland and urban environments meet, the WUI. In high-density neighborhoods during a severe wildfire, extreme burning conditions lead to a higher number of structures to burn. We all saw it. The structures are the fire's fuel. Dr. John Keeley's words, not mine. Once a few buildings ignite, a domino effect occurs. It's like a contagion effect. And the fires spread rapidly until the extreme burning conditions, usually driven by strong winds, as we all saw, completely diminish. This type of fire spread in a built environment is associated with costly wildfires in the urban environment. They're not the same as wildfires, by the way. Vegetation is the fire front, but that's not what happens here. So my concern is that when scientists, the insurance industry, all the experts, they don't all agree on everything, but boy, this one they agree on. Fire scientists say spacing between buildings is critical to stop an urban fire contagion effect. The height of the building is what the IBHS states. That's the insurance industry folks that do all the modeling and talk about if you are 20 feet away from a building that's taller than you and the fire catches that building on fire. And by the way, I want to just make sure we don't go down the home hardening rabbit hole, because that isn't going to stop this either. Because that has its limits and people still have to evacuate in major fires. So my question is, for the folks that are so supportive of this particular bill, are there any limits to this kind of growth? Or will the state keep upzoning and building even where the science says it's unsafe?
I do want to jump in and address that, because I think it's important to talk about where we're building. Right now, California builds around 100,000 homes a year. That is dramatically below what we need to be building, but that is what we're building. Of the places that we are building and of what we are building, much of that is single family homes in high fire areas. Yes, actually, much of that is single family homes in high fire areas. It's either more than or half than the 100,000 homes that we build every year are single family. If you look at California's patterns of development, the places that we are building are the places that are burning. That is historically how we have built, and it is in the wildland urban interface. It's not in cities. We need to move away from that model. If you talk about the insurance industry and what they are advocating for, that is exactly it. Moving out of construction in the WUI and into existing urban areas. Just part and parcel, that is what we need to be doing. So as far as this bill goes, that is the direction we are trying to move in. Obviously, you have the very high fire severity zone protections in SB 423. I think expansion of that, like those discussions are continuing. Many of the amendments that Laura discussed earlier on affordability, all of those are continuing. The reality is the bill still has another committee hearing, has an assembly floor vote, has a Senate concurrence vote. There's more stuff happening, and what I can guarantee is that there are more amendments coming. But it's important to recognize how California is building right now and where we're building right now.
Thank you for that, Jordan. I know there's limited time, Lisa. I just want to say this. For the love of God, if you are supporting this bill, please make sure you state that we cannot be building in the high fire severity zones. We shouldn't be building apartment buildings. We shouldn't be building more single family homes. We're building them 4 feet away from each other. I am living in one of those zones. We cannot continue to do this. So I'm all for building. I want to see affordable housing. I want to see it done right. I want to see communities like my friends in Northeast LA have the right type of places. I'm concerned about gentrification in bills like this as well. But for the love of God, we cannot continue, because there will be another Palisades. There will be another Altadena. And there's just in adding more structures, bigger structures, more density in these areas just absolutely defies science. But it's also just inhumane, if you ask me.
Okay, let's move to Glenn.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Just a couple comments on or questions regarding the previous references. First of all, unfortunately, LA is the way it was developed historically, and we're not San Francisco. So getting to transit means you need to be able to park there without, easily and conveniently, etc. And so my concern on the one provision that was mentioned regarding transforming the metro parking areas that there are, which I know is there are several that are ongoing proposals. I think it's fine to put housing there, but to take away the existing parking, I mean, it should be actually increased.
I think I can start to address this. I think there's this idea that we have in urban planning and in urban economics about the highest and best use of land. And so it's like if you have a parcel of land and it's a surface parking lot, presently, actually the city's probably losing money on it, to be quite frank, because the fees are very low. It still needs maintenance. There's also insurance that needs to be carried. You have to send out LED TOT workers to maintain it, or whoever may own the site. And so if there's a way, I'm not against parking myself. And if there's a way to make it work for our city, and there's a way that the city or our partner agencies or neighboring jurisdictions can build parking in a way that is fiscally responsible and economically sustainable and that also provides access to the people who need access to that transit station, a Metrolink or Metro Heavy Rail or what have you. That seems to me that's perfectly fine, and I think that is perfectly possible. It's not that any of this is excluded under SB 79, and if that is what the community needs and is asking for and asks for and can find a way to make the numbers work, there's nothing that's stopping that from happening.
Well, especially for the surrounding areas that need to feed into, say, the subway, all of those other things like to the Orange Line, which is a bus, or anything else. I'm not talking necessarily downtown LA, but I am speaking from a valley perspective, right? Traveling 2 miles to be able to get on transit as opposed to, walking 2 miles or whatever it is, even less than that. It's a debt. So anyway, I am responding to what comments were made earlier. And the other thing is, I don't know that in some cases, without any upgrades, some of these buses and bus line, even like the Orange Line, G Line, they're at capacity during rush hour, morning and afternoon peak. So, over time, and there's only a certain amount of increased service that can be provided. Theoretically, again, I'm all for building at transit, not necessarily a half mile away, but at some point if they're already at peak and people have to stand, I mean, that's really not welcoming. That's not encouraging getting out of their cars into transit. If they are so crowded, it does mean it's successful, but it also means recognizing that these things that are not subways have much limited capacity. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Okay, we're past the time that I told our panelists they would need to be here, but we'll try to wrap up in the next 10 minutes. And I'm hoping, because John, I thought was the last person who had a question, but we've got a couple more, so let's hope that Marianne is the last person. Joanne.
I'm Joanne D'Antonio, and I chair the city's Urban Forest Commission, the Community Forest Advisory Committee, and the Trees Committee of the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. At our last CFAC meeting, the city forest officer told us that our city's tree canopy is in decline. Jordan doesn't live here. I used to live in San Francisco. It's a very different situation here. Everything that gets built here takes out trees pretty much. And there's no regulation. If the tree is on your property, you can take it out, even a protected tree, as long as you plant 4 of them. And some of the planting plans for those 4 are pretty bizarre. One can wonder if they'll even survive. So we're now in a situation where the city is going to become unhealthy. How unhealthy do you want it to become? Because it's on its way to being an unlivable city. The more growth we allow, the more problems we're going to have in terms of health. So you can invite all these people to come live here, coming from somewhere else, as many of us did. I mean, I came in the 70s when this was an easy place to relocate to, but it was still a healthy environment then, except for the smog, which got better within the first 10 years that I was here. So trees, mitigate smog. Trees are very important. Metro's attitude toward trees, you look at their EIRs and they say, well, we'll replace them 2 to 1. On Van Nuys Boulevard, where they're building the light rail, they're taking out between 500 and 600 street trees, all of them. And they'll be gone for 5 years and then probably 10 years for them to grow into moderate sized trees if they're replanted. So Metro feels as long as they replant 2 to 1, they can do whatever they want. That's the city rule. We can't have, like the Board of Forestry is trying to impose something statewide. SB 79 is another statewide, sort of Trumpian, I hate to say that, but it's like enforcing something on us that we don't want. It's like it's
I'm sorry, Joanne, but we have 4 more speakers, or we have to be
Okay.
more succinct.
So,
We
all right,
have-
so the density is not, you have to find a limit to growth for this city. Very simply, where is that endpoint?
I'm sorry, I do feel the need to respond to that because I think I can speak for the other sponsors of this bill as well as the author when I say that we reject the notion that anything about this bill is Trumpian. In fact,
I have to concur. I don't
I-
think
I
that's
think only in the
appropriate.
sense that it's imposed on a city that isn't like any other city. I mean, it's built for cars.
That's not the definition of Trumpian.
Well, that's
I would also
that's-
say respectfully, I think every city thinks it's not like other cities, and I think there are more similarities than we realize. I will say I care quite a bit about urban tree canopies. This is work that Greenbelt has done for many years, and I think this ties into the larger conversation we've had about infrastructure. And one thing I think that gets missed about this bill is the significant amount of revenue that this will generate for the city. The redevelopment of existing properties that are paying very little in property tax with new, significantly greater development than currently exists there, you will see commensurate property tax increases for those parcels, revenue going to the city, all of which can be used to fund things like urban greening programs, programs to combat the urban heat island effect, et cetera. I know that infrastructure conversation came up earlier, but the reality is this bill is going to provide more in infrastructure dollars than it is going to cost the city. Our partners from Streets for All did a report on this. I'm happy to link it in the chat, or maybe Mark has already. But the reality is there are ways to pay for the infrastructure that we need. And do we need to find more? Yes, absolutely. I don't think anyone would disagree that California's infrastructure is in a pretty sorry state of disrepair, and that we need to do more to fund it. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox about that, but I think that is one thing everyone can agree on. The reality I think that we are looking at is, again, this comes back to trade-offs and what happens when you don't build in the places that we are talking about, in our cities, in our suburbs. And we are losing more tree canopy and more open space and more natural and working lands across the state, 50,000 acres every year. And that is the reality of our current development patterns. And I know it is, anytime you're making any change in the built environment, in a place where people are already living, things are hard. You're going to have a lot of very difficult conversations. But the reality is that we can't just do nothing. And I think that's where we come at this bill from.
Lisa, if you allow me to give some additional information to further what Jordan's
Well-
talking about on the
Well,
other side.
Laura, I have to interrupt. Laura has to go. So Laura, I apologize that we're running over, but thank you so much for joining us. And
I have in front of me an analysis, a rough analysis of some costs for only 3 developments in every NC area. Remember, there are 100 NCs. So for expansion of water, sewer, and stormwater costs $3,500 per units. So if we do 30,000 units, that would, for just those 3 developments in each NC, that will cost upfront $105 million. Water pipe installation is $1.25 million per development on average in the city. That would run us $375 million. I can go on. Sewer, stormwater installation, road upgrades, the signals, power grid, solid
go
waste.
on because it's 8:09.
And I will cut short there. We have a whole list and analysis, and this is again only for 3. That alone comes to upfront over $1 billion. And I'm just going to point out, we have an economic crisis in the city of LA. We aren't like other cities. We don't have the money, and what revenues will produce afterwards doesn't pay for what we need right now with an Olympics coming down at us. That doesn't include the first responder costs, which come to approximately $1.8 billion for early analysis. And I'm just going to raise the question because I am dealing with people who have lost their jobs in the city. Where do we find the money? And if this bill would fund it, I'll walk away happy.
Stacy, you're
Okay.
talking about $1,500 to extend water infrastructure, but you're not talking about the $15,000 that would come in property tax revenue. Like that is the delta here that we're talking about.
But I'm talking
Every
about we
year
don't have
on
the
a
money
recurring
up front to
basis.
do it. So we're going to build without the infrastructure. And in my neighborhood, between the brownouts and our collapsing streets and everything else that we've had, we've got a portion of the valley without water right now. We need to recognize we need to spend the money to able to increase the density, and it's all needed. That's all.
Okay, John, and then I think we're really running over, but John, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Hi. Yeah, I recognize we're running late, so I kind of don't know if I want to ask more questions, but maybe this can be maybe an email follow-up to this larger group or something. But I know that there was a lot of talk in the chat and throughout, particularly from Laura, but she has left the meeting about affordability. And I know that reading the bill, I see the word affordability requirements all over the bill. So I thought it would be maybe useful, again, if we have the time, which is in short supply, particularly, I think this is more directed towards Jordan, to maybe go over some of the ways that SB 79 or interlocks with existing affordability requirements, because I do think that is something that's very important to our communities. And I think that a lot of people point to the bill as saying it doesn't have affordability requirements, when in fact it's intertwined with existing so many other state laws that have been passed to ensure that we can still have affordable development while we're also directing development where it needs to be. I don't want to, again, take too long, but I will just say, since every other commenter has, I commute from my house here in Eagle Rock all the way to UCLA, and I live 40 minutes away from the nearest train station by walking, because there's just not enough affordable housing nearby. And I just feel like by this bill, if we can create more options for people to live closer to transit, or maybe, whether it's here in Northeast LA or say around Westwood Rancho Park Station on the E line, we would be able to shorten our commutes and lessen our environmental burden on our city and our nation, and not nation, our community. And I think that's really important. But my main question was, I thought it would be useful to talk a little bit about where the affordability requirements kind of interlock with SB 79.
Jordan, are you able to give like a 1-sentence answer?
I will do my best to give a 1.5 sentence answer, and it will probably be a run-on sentence. So the answer is my second grade teacher would not be happy with me. The answer is that SB 79 essentially requires if a city already has a local inclusionary zoning program, a local inclusionary housing program, that policy applies. The bill defers to the locality on affordable housing. In jurisdictions that don't already have an inclusionary housing program, there aren't actually that many of them throughout California, but in places that don't have an existing program, what the bill says is that essentially if you're going to build, I think it's exclusively 10 units or above. But when it comes to those projects, you have to follow state density bonus law, which is existing law around housing affordability. And there are a couple different tiers to that. There are a couple different levels of affordability that there's sort of a menu that you can choose from. But I know that we're short on time. I do want to say this when it comes to affordability. Our view of affordability is that when you look at the housing stock in California, 97-ish% of people are living in private housing on the open market. They're not living in deed-restricted affordable housing. And we believe we both need to dramatically accelerate the amount of deed-restricted affordable housing while also lowering market rents for people living in housing on the open market, which is, I think, most of us, probably most of us on this call, if not all of us. The way to do that is by increasing supply of all types of housing. And that is what we believe SB 79 will do in the right places.
And I hope, I don't know, Anders, I hope you've put in some resources, some research connected to that. Okay, Michael, if you can be very quick, please.
I'll be super brief. Thank you all so much for the conversation. That was really great, really illuminating. I just want to, coming up here at the end, just voice my very strong support for SB 79. I should say, I think a lot of people have raised some very valid points about affordability, about, transit access and everything. But I think we as a city, as a region, if you look at the metrics, we're going in the wrong direction on a lot of these parameters. If I'm looking right now at sort of the RHNA progress for the city of Los Angeles, 3.2% of the way to their state mandated goal on very low income housing. So something really needs to change, and they're not meeting their above moderate metric either. Like, we need more housing. We need to target it at just the places that this bill does, at major transit stops. And there's a ton of misinformation about the transit issue. I'll just say the bill does specify buses of a certain 15-minute frequency in dedicated lanes or in a dedicated right of way, which would not, the vast majority of the bus lines in LA would not meet that standard. So I think I really appreciate the work you've done to kind of clarify a lot of those issues, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi
Marianne.
there. Something resonates with me that Chris said about how people have moved out of the city of Los Angeles. This has been going on for a while. Palmdale, Lancaster, they're moving out because they desire single-family homes. These are probably young families that can't afford the single-family homes here and probably couldn't 20 years ago either. So there's a desire for single-family homes. This bill opts to demolish single-family homes for multifamily homes. So what's going to happen to the single-family homes affordability? It's just going to get worse. And this bill, these affordable set-aside is paltry. I mean, come on, 7%, extremely low income. So on a 100-unit building, you're going to do 7 set-asides. Whoa, whoop-dee, wow. So I think this misses a lot. All it's doing is opening up single-family zone properties for developers to come in and do 5, 6, 7-story. Let's let SB9 do its job, right? Let's work gradually into this higher density situation and have a mix of housing that people can afford and not all be shoved into little, 700 square foot, 4,000 a month units. It's just, it's not affordable, and it's destroying single family that is affordable, and that's my main objection with this bill, and it interferes with everything that we have put together in our housing element. So it just needs to let us do our job down here in LA, and we'll see you next housing element, which is 2029. I mean, we should take it from there. And I have no problem with Metro doing whatever they want on their property. I mean, I'm all for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 424, please, go ahead. Quickly, please. Okay, or not.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone. Our AT&T building had a fire. We don't have internet. I just wanted to point out Harbor Gateway North is a essentially working class community. We're very narrow. So our understanding is that this would cover all of our residential neighborhoods. And as others have pointed out, the public transportation in our area is not that great, but we're considered that even though the Gardena bus runs slowly about every 20 minutes, we're considered a within a half-mile density can be built. So,
Your connection is not very good. So do you have a question that you can ask?
No, I just wanted to point out that as others said, the public transportation in Los Angeles is not ready for this.
Okay, your connection is not very good, unfortunately. Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can now. You froze up for a second.
Yep. I don't have good internet out in here.
Sometimes you just try to fake us out.
A woman, sorry?
Sometimes you just try to fake us out. So we always have to keep on top of it.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining and for staying longer. I wanted to have going forward. I expect the bill some sort that the amendments are not done. I think there are ways, people are complaining about loss of local control. And I've had some conversations with some folks about, ways people can do things here at the local level to maybe make it a little bit more palatable. So it might be interesting to see what people can do here at the local level. I had hoped to have more conversations about green spaces and walkability. We didn't do that as much as I had hoped we would, but those are things that I think are really important, because I do think the community, the character of the neighborhoods is important. And I do think, what'd you say? Oh, I'm freezing up. Ugh.
You were freezing up a little bit.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Hey, Lisa, can I just add something? I'm so glad you brought that up super quick. There's a bill right now
it's 823. cannot. We have to move on. So there's this.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
Chris wrote, great. So we actually have our committee reports that we have to move to. But thank you so much, Jordan and Stacy and Chris, for joining us. Thank you so much for that. And let's
Lisa,
go
thank you for inviting me, and I'd like to thank the others that were speaking on the bill, particularly
Yes.
Jordan, and I think it was Chris, if I got that
Yes.
correct. I learn a little bit every time I hear others speak, and thanks for the work that you're doing. We don't have to be in agreement on everything, but your work is appreciated.
Right, I appreciate that. And we don't have to be in agreement, and sometimes it's better that we're not, because that's how we learn from each other and grow.
Yeah, I want to echo the same sentiments. I really appreciate the most valuable thing we have is our time. And I really appreciate everyone spending gosh, almost 2 hours of yours with us tonight, regardless of where you are in the bill. Just know that your time was appreciated by all of us.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
The only thing I'll add on top of this is just a big thank you to Lisa and Anders. I know this was a big effort. There's a lot of strong feelings around it, and it's not always easy to navigate these conversations, but we really appreciate you making the space.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all, and to be continued. So good night to the remaining panelists, and we'll move on now to our committee reports. And we'll do them very, very fast because we want to get out of here and respect everybody's time. Okay. Advocacy, we've been working on artificial turf, native plants, and the Olympics. The LA 28 Sustainability Report. I'm on the LA 28 Sustainability Group representing this organization. It has come out, but has not been released publicly. I've been able to see it, but
I'm not supposed to be.
And then the public bank, we're working on that a little bit. Charter reform is gotten going. And sorry, I didn't mean to scroll forward. And we're working on gray water systems with LA San. Our next meeting is September 7th, and we are looking for a co-chair. So if you're interested, join us. AJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. So one of the things that we are working on the Energy Committee is for our upcoming meeting. We will be having a guest by the name of Timothy O'Connor from the LADWP Office of the Ratepayer Advocate. Also accompanied by our representatives of the LA 100 plan, one of our committee members, Ravi, and one of our former committee members, Dan. And then also we're continuing our focus around advocacy around the resilient rebuild in the Palisades area. Apologies, I should have clarified that in my bullet point. But we're continuing to work diligently with Tracy Parks District. There's a lot of there's a lot of conflicting changes in local legislation, and we just want to ensure that the goal is for a resilient rebuild. The second thing is one of our other committee members is actually promoting the climate reality meeting on Tuesday, August 12th. Once again, one of our committee members, Ravi, and then also Dan of the LA 100 plan are going to be having conversation around it. And then last but not least, our energy committee is also seeking a new co-chair. So anybody interested, please send an email to the committee shared email. As a reminder, our meetings are every third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. and hope to see you there.
Great. Muriel.
We just had our meeting this past Thursday. We kind of went over workshopping our committee mission statement and our charter draft. Oh goodness, it should say transportation and land use. So I should have updated the slide. We also had an SV 79 discussion, just kind of like a brief one that just kind of just like a brief overview of it. So it wasn't as in-depth as this past conversation. And also, we're also looking for a co-chair. So please reach out to murielnacar@gmail.com. Thank you.
Trees, Joanne.
Just trying to
Joanne?
I'm trying to get myself unmuted. Sorry. Yes, the Trees Committee met at the end of July. We had a really active meeting. It was kind of a town hall. The next meeting is tentatively Saturday, September 20th on Zoom, 1:30 to 3:30. As of now, the topic is the city forest officer indicated CFAC that the city tree canopy is declining, and we're going to be discussing all the different ways that we can try to advocate. It's going to require code changes. It's a very tough situation. You know, developers can take out every tree. So and yet I went to a place where they had built around trees, but that was in the 1980s. We don't do that anymore. Anyway, the next Board of Forestry meeting is on Zone 0 is on August 18th from 10 to 5. Unfortunately, I think the City Charter Commission meets that day too. But registration is now open for the Zone 0, and they haven't posted the agenda yet. The revised proposed regulations likely will be released the day before the meeting. That's what they did for the July meeting. Their September 18th meeting is due to be in Southern California, but they haven't said what city, and they haven't really given us much information at all about it. These Zone 0 requirements affect all of us. They require immense vegetation removal, and further tree canopy decline is going to make the city hotter. So this is a serious problem. I've sent out fact sheets to the Trees Committee. If you want more information, you may email me and I can send you a fact sheet. My email's at the bottom of this card. And we need thousands of public comment letters. They've only gotten about, well, at the last count, around 2,000, and that's the whole state. And this is a situation where people in Northern California are trying to dictate what is best in fires in Southern California, which, as Diana explained, the fires move from structure to structure, and trees actually have been mitigating the fire from spreading. So we're trying to get that point across that many scientists have made, and the Board of Forestry has been kind of deaf about it so far. And I'm going to skip the last item because I got an email right before that neighborhood councils are fighting back. So we'll see what happens. I just put that in because I heard that at the Charter Commission meeting in July, but there was another one yesterday that I did not attend. Okay, thank you. See you in September.
All right, Jerry.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So this is like a relatively newer committee. It's the Youth Environmental Action Council. So far, what the students have expressed interest in is creating some sort of curriculum for schools focused on different neighborhood council sustainability alliance issue areas. So one of the really big ones is like artificial turf and the urban heat island effect and things like that. So just educating students about that and also getting them involved with the advocacy through public comment and increasing awareness through information campaigns in general. We are still looking for youth participants. And we're kind of always open for more people to join. So I mean, if your neighborhood council has like a youth representative, or you know youth that are interested in the environmental space as well, please let them know about this opportunity. And I will put the link in the chat to sign up. That way you guys can share it with people you know. And we meet on the second Friday of each month at 6:30 p.m. And that's the later time is very much so that we can try and get more students involved. So yeah.
Thank you. And I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself in the beginning. Do you want to say who you are?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry Yang. I'm the youth representative for the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. I serve as the youth representative for the North Hollywood Neighborhood Council, and I also do a lot of work with the city of Los Angeles and LA Unified School District. So
Great, thank you. Any announcements? I'll share one. Our September meeting is at the Congress. We're gonna do something on zero waste and trying to make the Congress lower waste. So that's still in the works, but we'll see you at the Congress Saturday, September 27th. Any other announcements? Anybody? No, we don't have to have any announcements. We're running over, so we can say goodnight. Glenn, I figured. Glenn, go for it.
Well, just a reminder, Budget Advocates are organizing its departmental teams, and we're trying to move up the meetings as soon as the mayor puts out her budget letter to the city departments in typically mid-September. So we're trying to schedule our meetings September through October. So if you or anyone you know is interested in joining our meetings with the city department heads, check out our website, budgetadvocates.org, send us an email. And if you're on Neighborhood Council, you should be receiving an invitation to that effect. But if you're not, you won't receive it unless we sign you up. So let us know or put it in chat if I get it before this ends. And there was a mention by Joanne about the Charter Reform Commission. I mean, they have a deadline of March, and they're working. They're meeting twice a month at least, and do check out their website. And at least somebody, I think, from every neighborhood council should be monitoring that. And they're meeting in different locations throughout the city. So it's important, I think, when they meet in your local area for those local neighborhood councils to have a presence. So far, we've been successful in the meetings I've been to for various representatives of half dozen or so neighborhood councils. Keep it on their mind. There's some pressure to well, some people are saying strengthen the influence of neighborhood councils, but there's also some folks who are questioning whether the neighborhood council should exist. So I'm just putting that out there that, you know, they have the role to put in changes in the charter, which would affect either one of those outcomes. So it's important that we have a continuing presence at each of the meetings now through March. I know we've got a full plate, but that's important and timely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Charlene.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that Ciclavia is going to be September 14th, and it's going to be running through South LA. So there's going to be a few neighborhood councils that are going to be tabling. Zapata King, maybe South Central, and I got to find out if Voices. But anyway, it's September 14th, and it's running on Central Avenue from Washington all the way down to Watts, maybe 103rd. So I find some information, Lisa, I'll send it to you. Maybe we could put it out
Oh, yes, that would be great.
as an email, okay?
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Okay. Thank you, guys, and please remember to complete the evaluation, and we're not too far over, so that's amazing. Thank you all for your participation. I think it was a really good conversation, and have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you,
And good night.
Lisa.
Bye.
Bye.
thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting meeting.
Yes, I think so too.
Yeah.